Red Bull's 2026 power unit just got exposed and the weakness is bigger than anyone imagined. Leaked data confirms a critical overheating issue during full race simulations, triggered by the FIA's aggressive new electric deployment rules. The worst part? This flaw can't be patched without redesigning key battery systems, and time is running out before homologation. Subscribe now because this hidden vulnerability could be the moment Red Bull's unstoppable era finally hits a wall. The 2026 Formula One regulations are a seismic shift mandating a 50-50 power balance between combustion and electric systems. That change is no longer theoretical. It's active, and it's already reshaping the grid. Every manufacturer is racing to meet a standard that rewrites how engines behave, how energy is deployed, and how reliability is managed over a race weekend. And Red Bull, who had the most to prove with their brand new power unit, is now facing a reality no one expected this early. After years of relying on Honda's proven powertrains, Red Bull decided to take full control of their destiny. With Ford on board as a strategic partner, they launched Red Bull powertrains and began building their own hybrid engine from the ground up. The move was bold, visionary, and incredibly risky. They wanted to set the pace for 2026, not follow it. But now, less than a year before lights out, internal data leaks suggest that aggressive energy recovery strategies have introduced a dangerous trade-off: thermal instability. According to insiders close to the development program, Red Bull's system excels in harvesting energy perhaps too well. During simulations and dyno runs, the hybrid system appears to overload its own thermal management capabilities under long-distance, full deployment conditions. In short stints, the car looks fast. But stretch that performance over race distance, and the power unit starts to heat beyond safe operational limits. That's not just a drop in pace, it's a potential failure point. The problem lies in the interaction between battery, inverter, and cooling layout. To maintain aerodynamic tightness, Red Bull placed most of the thermal systems within a compressed rear chassis profile. While that design is brilliant for airflow and packaging, it leaves very little room for error when heat builds up rapidly. On high degradation tracks or in hot climates, the system may not be able to self-regulate quickly enough, a flaw that turns every lap into a balancing act between power and survival. What's more concerning is how unpredictable the problem is. The flaw doesn't show up consistently in all testing conditions. It tends to spike under very specific circumstances: rapid energy recovery across multiple braking zones, followed by heavy electric deployment on straights. These scenarios mimic real race conditions on circuits like Baku, Jeddah, and Montreal, places where the hybrid system is heavily leaned on. If Red Bull can't guarantee thermal stability across those layouts, their season becomes a calendar of risk. And this isn't a flaw that can be solved overnight. With the FIA's homologation rules locking in core engine architecture for multiple years, Red Bull now faces the possibility of either running a restricted deployment mode or making emergency design adjustments within extremely tight deadlines. Either option costs performance. In a sport where fractions of a second determine pole position or grid penalty, that gap could be catastrophic, not just in one race, but across the entire championship. The silence from Red Bull so far is telling. Unlike previous years where power unit progress was celebrated publicly, there's been near-total radio silence from Milton Keynes and Dearborn. No press briefings, no simulated race stats, no hype. Just closed-door testing and speculation. That quiet isn't confidence, it's containment. And in Formula One, when the fastest team suddenly goes quiet, it usually means they're fighting a fire you were never supposed to see. Inside Red Bull's development center, the issue isn't just overheating, it's thermal saturation under variable race loads. The problem stems from how the battery and NGUK interact during high-energy sequences. When a driver enters successive heavy braking zones and immediately transitions into full electric deployment, the hybrid system is forced to recover and deliver massive amounts of energy in short bursts. Data shows that in these sequences, localized heat buildup in the battery cells exceeds safety margins, even when ambient temperatures are moderate. The weakness becomes even more apparent when comparing Red Bull's recovery strategy with that of rival manufacturers. Unlike Mercedes or Ferrari, who are using a staged energy return model that spreads recovery across broader track sections, Red Bull's system is designed for peak efficiency. It collects more charge, more quickly, but in doing so, it creates high thermal spikes concentrated in a narrower window of time. These heat surges place enormous stress on the battery casing and inverter system, which is already packed tightly into a narrow aero-optimized zone. Telemetry leaks suggest that the battery pack's internal resistance increases rapidly under sustained load, a sign that cells are not dissipating heat evenly. This internal imbalance could lead to performance degradation mid-race, where electrical output drops without warning. That kind of inconsistency makes race strategy unpredictable. Engineers can't rely on deployment windows if they don't know when the system will be forced to protect itself, and that's exactly what the latest simulations are beginning to reveal. A particularly alarming data point shows that Red Bull's power unit begins to limit energy deployment after just 6 laps of sustained high-load usage. On tracks with long straights and multiple DRS zones, think Monza or Silverstone, that limitation could be disastrous. Once the hybrid system pulls back, the car loses acceleration out of corners and downforce compensation in key overtaking zones. In a field as tight as the 2026 grid is expected to be, that kind of mid-race power fade will be punished brutally. Another behind-the-scenes challenge is the lack of space for additional cooling retrofits. Unlike factory teams with engine chassis control from day one, Red Bull's aggressive rear-end packaging was committed early in the development cycle. Their push for aerodynamic minimalism means there's little room to insert larger radiators or reroute air channels without impacting the car's balance and downforce profile. That leaves the team with very few options, either to tune the system or re-engineer the cooling circuit within a space-constrained architecture, a nearly impossible task this late in development. Engineers close to the project have reportedly floated adding external thermal buffer units or heat dump loop systems that can absorb temporary energy surges and stabilize temperature through short laps. But these are weighty solutions that don't scale well across race distance. Plus, the FIA's new weight regulations for 2026 are already brutally tight. Any extra mass has to be justified in lap time gains, and right now, the math doesn't favor a heavy fix for a heat-based problem that shows up intermittently. Perhaps the most overlooked risk is how this flaw could impact Red Bull's driver deployment strategy. With the hybrid system forced into self-preservation mode more often, drivers might be limited in how they use electric boost for defense or overtaking. In a wheel-to-wheel battle, this puts them at a massive disadvantage. Imagine Verstappen closing into a DRS zone but unable to access full hybrid power because the system is too hot. In a single moment, the technical flaw becomes a strategic vulnerability, and in a title fight, that could be the difference between first and fourth. To address this growing crisis, Red Bull Powertrains has quietly initiated a full-spectrum diagnostics operation. Their top engineering teams are now running hybrid thermal stress simulations across multiple track profiles, not just race circuits like Bahrain and Suzuka, but also extreme condition replicas such as Mexico City's high-altitude air density and Singapore's relentless humidity. These scenarios are being used to pinpoint exactly where and when the system fails, because without that precision, no meaningful fix can be applied without risking either performance or reliability. One of the first strategies being tested is a new layered energy deployment map, designed to reduce heat buildup by redistributing when and where the battery is allowed to deploy maximum torque. Instead of flat, linear energy releases throughout a lap, this new model uses real-time GPS and telemetry to shift deployment toward straights with higher natural cooling and avoid recovery in tight corners where airflow is minimal. It's an intelligent workaround, but it inherently reduces flexibility for the driver, who may no longer be able to call on peak power whenever needed. Simultaneously, engineers are working on an active cooling augmentation system, a targeted airflow injection module that channels air from the floor and suspension zones directly into the battery housing during overload phases. The design takes advantage of areas where natural aerodynamic pressure builds up under braking. By redirecting that airflow with active valves, they hope to cool specific battery sectors without affecting the car's external profile or breaching FIA bodywork regulations. It's cutting edge, but still in prototype stages, and untested over full race distance. Another area under review is the battery chemistry itself. While most teams are locked into standard lithium-ion formulations, Red Bull's partnership with Ford gives them access to advanced cell structures currently used in high-end electric vehicles. One proposed solution involves introducing ceramic thermal buffers between cells, which absorb and deflect heat during charge surges without adding significant weight. But incorporating this into the current pack design would require a full disassembly and rebuild, a time-consuming process that carries its own homologation risks if it stretches too close to the deadline. Internally, Red Bull's software division is also rewriting the thermal predictive models that guide energy strategy during a race. The existing logic reacts to temperature increases, but what's now required is true anticipation, a system that knows when a heat spike will happen based on track behavior, ambient conditions, and car usage history. It's a type of machine learning not previously used at this level of deployment, and if they pull it off, it may not just solve this problem, it could give Red Bull a strategic energy advantage across an entire race season. But despite these innovations, the biggest constraint remains time. With the homologation window fast approaching and no extensions likely from the FIA, Red Bull's engineers are operating under immense pressure. Every test they run, every component they adjust, must be validated, revalidated, and locked in before the clock runs out. The risk of pushing a fix too fast is that it introduces new problems, but the risk of waiting too long is entering the season with a known failure mode that your rivals are fully aware of. The most unsettling part is what's happening in other garages. Rival teams, especially Mercedes and Ferrari, are reportedly monitoring Red Bull's silence very closely. Every missed press update, every change in test calendar, every piece of body language in the paddock becomes a clue. In Formula One, perception is power. If rivals sense that Red Bull is scrambling, they'll exploit it. In setup choices, strategy, even politics. This is no longer just an engineering battle, it's psychological warfare. And Red Bull now must win both fronts to survive 2026.